Hey everybody, Elizabeth Nader back with you again, Jersey First TV. The future is in our youth, and we all know that. But somebody that knows that very well and is here to help us understand how they're changing our future is Representative Joe Mitchell from Iowa. Representative Mitchell, welcome to the show.
Elizabeth, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
We are so impressed with you. When we found out about not only what you have done, but the organization that you helped found, we know we needed to bring this to the audience in New Jersey. So you ran for a state representative at age 21. Tell us about that. I mean, that's something that would not even occur often to youth who are in college and doing their own thing and figuring out who they are. And here you are running for state office. What inspired you to do it?
Yeah, of course. Well, Elizabeth, the first thing is I started working at the Capitol at a fairly young age. I came up here at 17 through the
Wow.
Iowa PAGE program, which is almost like an internship for high school seniors or juniors to come up and experience real life, real life on how state government works and the functions of it and how important it is to our daily lives here in the state of Iowa and all across the country. And so came up here, initially did that. Fell in love with it, went to Drake University here in Des Moines, studied business, but still was always drawn to politics and to government. And so continued to work here at the Capitol as a clerk in the state Senate for 2 years, and then went on to work for Governor Kim Reynolds in her office as an intern and Senator Joni Ernst as an intern in her office in D.C. And I came back to Iowa after my internship in D.C., some before my junior year. And I came back, and my predecessor of 24 years, Dave Heaton, had decided to retire. And so Representative Heaton had been the state representative for my home district back home for longer than I've been alive. And so when he decided to retire, I had one of those gut feelings. And it was, was I going to put my name on the ballot and have enough courage and guts to do so to bring the change that I thought was necessary and needed to my community? Or was I going to be afraid, right? And so, ultimately I decided to put my name, on that ballot, and I filed as a 20-year-old. 21 is the minimum age to be a state representative in the state of Iowa. Knew I was going to be 21 by the time election day came around, but had a lot of doubts. The first conversation I had, was with Representative Heaton, who's now a good friend and mentor of mine. But Representative Heaton told me at the time, he said, "Joe, you're too young. You need more experience, and you need to get, a wife and kids and a family, and you can do this in 10 or 15 years, right? You got your whole life ahead of you."
Yeah.
And so, ultimately against, his advice, I decided to still, file and run for office. But I had several other people that were former and current representatives that said, "Joe, what do you have to lose? You know what I mean? If you lose a primary, you lose, and no one's going to hold that against you." So ultimately decided to file, had a 4-way primary, was running against people 2 or 3 times my age,
Wow.
folks that had a lot more resources and backing from the party than I did. But I went out there and I knocked thousands of doors. I knocked on thousands of doors, talked to constituents across my district, made hundreds of phone calls to constituents across my district, asked them for their vote and listened to them. And ultimately won by 100 votes in that primary, 3 percentage points, and went on to become the Republican nominee. And ultimately, what I learned from that experience was that young people have a unique, not only a unique perspective, but a unique take on things, because we have the time and energy to spend to devote our whole entire, life and time at that point to knocking on doors, to putting in the hard work and listening to people and really getting to know the issues and the constituents that you represent. And so went on to the general, won the general by 20 points. It's a fairly conservative district in Southeast Iowa. Got elected in November of 2018, graduated college in December of 2018, and got sworn into the Iowa House as the youngest member ever in January of 2019.
Wow, what a story. My goodness, what an inspiring story. So you represent Gen Z, as we call it, that generation.
Correct.
Now, some of us don't really know the definition of that. How do you define, what is that age group for Gen Z?
Well, it depends who you ask, right? But the definitions, the formal definitions I found online is 1995 to 2012. You can find 1997 to 2012. But essentially what we do with our organization, which we'll talk about in a minute, but we work with folks under 30 to get them elected to state and local office, get conservatives elected. And so, we're using it as a broader definition, but really just talking about the next generation of young leaders that are ultimately going to have to take the reins and, bring positive change to our communities across the country.
Desperately needed. What was it like for you to be the youngest serving? You walk into that chamber, there you are, 21 years old. What kind of reaction did you get? Did the caucus really embrace you? What was that like for you?
Yeah, well, several folks mistake me as an intern and as a clerk still when I first came back up. But eventually, folks, realized obviously I was up there and I was a representative, and that I was up there to do a job for my constituents. And the way I explain it is that our speaker, our majority leader, are both folks that are under 40. They got elected at their mid 30s to these positions.
Yeah.
And I realized that a lot of folks that are over 65, 70 think anybody under 40 is a young person, right? And so, we have a history here in the Iowa legislature of allowing young people to be able to serve and, powers or positions of influence. And, it's really about, earning that respect, right? I mean, if you know the issues, if you know the policy, then people are going to respect you. And regardless of your age, if you know what you're doing and you know what you're talking about, people are going to, you're going to respect you and follow you.
And take you seriously. So you win, which was historic, and congratulations for that. And you continue to serve, and you decide to help found this organization, to found Run GenZ. So the impetus behind that, assuming, was your incredible victory and thinking, I'm not the only one here. So you decide to found this. Tell me about the beginning of that organization.
Yeah, of course. So obviously, shortly after I got elected, I realized there's not a ton of young people like me in the legislature, especially that are conservative.
Yeah.
And so I saw that as a problem on, a few different levels. Number one, I do think that, different ages and demographics should be proportionally represented, in their respective governments. But the other thing was too, is I've seen people my age, young people in general that, obviously are liberal, but are like far left, right? That are, okay and comfortable with, calling themselves socialists and communist. And, those are comfortable words to them, which, I think years ago, we've always had, our younger population's always been more liberal, right?
Right.
But it's been to the extent where once they get older, they start moving back to the middle and they become conservative a lot of times. And I feel like that's not happening now. And so, I think the best way to take on that issue and to be able to bring folks, more back to the center and to, being conservative is to have folks that resemble them and look like them and elect positions that have a platform that can communicate to other young people that, hey, these policies that have destroyed countries, that have destroyed lives across the country or across the world, are not the sort of policies that we would institute in our state and local governments across this country, right?
Yeah.
And so essentially, those are the two components that, kind of started getting me thinking about, recruiting more young conservatives to run for office. But also when I would go and speak to different young professional groups, I would tell them, I said, if I can do it, you can do it. The best way to bring change to your community is to run for something and make a difference and actually institute good public policy.
Yeah.
And so, I feel like, some people, prior to me, maybe, don't want the competition, of having other young people involved and having the spotlight. But I'm like, bring it on. Let's have as many young people as possible running and winning office to be able to make a positive change for the future. Because ultimately, it's us that are going to have to live with the consequences of public policy being passed today.
Yeah.
And so that's when I went out and recruited a team of young leaders to join me and to be the initial leadership team for Run GenZ. So recruited two young women from Florida, Josie Tomkow and Amber Mariano. Amber was the youngest elected representative ever in Florida's history, got elected at 21. Josie got elected at 23, recruited Caleb Hanna. Caleb's a state representative from West Virginia. Caleb got elected at 18 as the youngest African-American ever elected to a state office in American history.
Wow.
And then Joe Alexander from New Hampshire up your guys' way. And so Joe got elected at 23 and is one of four openly gay Republicans in the state legislatures across the country. So wanted to form this diverse group of young conservatives to come together to be able to reach every different demographic across this country, to be able to say, hey, it doesn't matter your race, your sexual orientation, your gender. If you're a conservative, you believe in these principles of limited government, constitutionally focused government, then we want you to come along with us, and we want you to run for office, and we want you to help make a change and make a real difference in this country.
It's amazing when you go to your website and you see all of the individuals that you've been able to get into office at all different levels. It's incredibly impressive. I have to ask you, when you think about that age category, especially someone at 21 who's maybe still in college, and there's a lot of theory in college, right? There's a lot of liberal theory taught. It's all, well, this is the way we should run a government because it's the best way to, help everyone. It's not based in reality. It's based in these professors being liberal and theory and all of that. It's not really until you make a paycheck, until you raise a family often, that we find people start to realize this doesn't work. So Joe, how do you take people that young and get them to sort of wake up to the realities that what's talked about in the theories in the labs of the universities doesn't really work in real life?
Yeah, of course. So, essentially what we do, Elizabeth, is we partner up with other grassroots organizations that are doing a phenomenal job, on that ground level and at college universities. And we take the leaders from those organizations, we run them for office, right? So we partner with Turning Point USA, college Republicans, young Republicans. And what we do is we, go to their conferences, we go to their trainings, we go to their chapter meetings. We speak to these young people that are already conservative, right? That are already right down the alley that we want to work with, to be able to take those folks and take them from being the presidents of those chapters to actually running and being a school board member, to being a city council member, to running for a state legislative seat. And so, we're not necessarily in the business of going on college campuses and trying to turn, a young person that might consider themselves liberal to being conservative. But we do rely heavily on our grassroots partners to be able to do that. And then we go in and find those young leaders from those organizations on those college campuses and run them for office.
So what does Gen Z care about? What does your generation care about? What do they talk about? What are the issues most important to them?
Yeah, well, I think number one, it depends, what they're running for, right? Whether they're running for school board or state legislative seat or a city council or a county supervisor seat. But I think, ultimately, Generation Z wants to see accountability. And what we see right now is unchecked power from the federal government, sometimes even from the state governments, where they're just spending an endless amount of money that we're eventually going to have to pay back, right? And they see policies being put in place that are going to affect our generations for years to come. When we shut down schools for sometimes up to a year and a half to 2 years after this pandemic has started, I mean, some of these states fully don't have students fully back in school 100% of the time without virtual learning. And so I think, my generation, specifically conservatives, see the detriment that that's going to have on these students' lives for years to come into adulthood. And so they've seen, how negatively impactful that, these state and local governments can be, and then have directly affected our generation. And so I think you've seen a lot of people fired up about that. And very upset. And, then you tackle on the vaccine mandates, the mask mandates. And so, you've seen a lot of people in my generation had their lives severely altered from what was normal, when I was going and, when I was in college or when I was in high school. And so I think you see a lot of frustration for my generation, specifically if they're conservative. And there's frustration across the board, whether you're liberal or conservative. I think in my generation in general, some justified, some not. But I think for the most part, a lot of these young conservatives are fed up with how they've been treated the last few years by their state, local, and federal governments, and they're ready to do something.
And one of the best things they can do is run for office. And you described your campaign. It's the old fashioned way. It's knocking on doors. It's getting in front of so many people. There's really no better way to do it. So you help not only recruit them, but mentor them. You have built a pretty impressive board of advisors. Tell us about these former governors. I mean, they're obviously seeing what a powerful approach this is to shaping our future. Who did you get on your board?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, for our audience, what we do essentially, like I talked about, this grassroots organizations, we go out, partner with folks like Turning Point USA, partner with, young Republicans. we go out there and get their leaders or their members to be able to run for office, right? So we empower them. So we're empowering them with our story, with my story, with my team member's story about running for office at a young age. And the second thing we do is we go out and we find what is a viable office in your community right now to run for, right? We want you to run for an open seat. We want you to run for something that there's not necessarily a conservative right now running in. And then the last part of that is pairing you up with a mentor, somebody like myself or one of my team members to help you, throughout that race. But, last year when I was starting this organization, we're trying to build this from the ground up. I contacted my former governor and a good friend of mine, Governor Terry Branstad. So Governor Branstad, also former ambassador to China under the Trump administration. But Governor Branstad, little do people know that he is the longest serving governor in American history.
Yeah,
I mean,
amazing.
that is huge. I mean, so the guy that was the longest serving governor before him was the first governor of New York, right? Like this guy was like, this is back in the 1800s. So very, very impressive resume. Has never lost an election in his life. But the unique thing about Governor Branstad, or one of the unique things about him, is he got elected 25 to the state legislature. And so, contacted Governor Branstad, told him about this idea. He absolutely loved it because he said, this is exactly what I needed when I first ran, right? And so he was a law student when he first ran. Again, he was 25 years old when he won his first election, to the Iowa State House. And so, he, I think, saw himself in me, right? And saw himself in the rest of my team members who got elected at a young age. And what he said is, we got to call more governors and get them on this advisory board to get legitimacy behind this organization. So he called up Governor Chris Christie, Governor Rick Perry, Governor Bill Owens, Governor Merrick Fallon, Governor John Sununu Sr. And so, a lot of these guys that have been around the block, but also got elected at a very young age. Governor Christie got elected to his first county board at age 30.
Right.
Governor Rick Perry got elected to the state legislature at, age 32. Governor Fallon was, I believe, the youngest woman ever elected to the state house, then went on to be the first woman, statewide elected female in the state of Oklahoma, and then the first woman governor in the state of Oklahoma, right? So a lot of folks that had started out as a young age and have done incredible things throughout their lives and have shaped American history, essentially. And so that's who we have on our board of advisors that are helping promote this organization, the success that we've been able to have over the last year.
Yeah, they obviously caught the spirit of it because they themselves actually did this. And it's so critically important. We need to get you guys out to New Jersey. We're going to work on that with your organization to come out
100%.
here. And,
we would love to do that. And we worked with a young man from New Jersey, Vinny, this last election cycle. And so
I know him.
You guys have some incredible people out there when we're hoping to be a force to be reckoned with in 2023 in New Jersey.
It's true. And we've made some incredible changes this past November. So we're right there with you. We want everyone to look at New Jersey. So we're going to get you out here. I thank you for giving us your time. I know you're so busy. Congratulations on doing this, on putting together this organization, on having the foresight to encourage people to run. Your success alone with yourself is incredible, but what you've done with others is truly impressive and so encouraging for the rest of us. So, Joe, I wish you continued success. We are going to have you out in New Jersey. Run GenZ. Anyone listening, guys, go check them out. Go to their website, rungenz.com, right?
Yep, rungenz.com. And we're on social media as well at run.genz for Instagram and then at Run GenZ for Twitter and Facebook. So please go check us out, message us. If you want to be on our email list, would love to have you guys on there as well. But Elizabeth, really appreciate you having me on today, and we're looking forward to coming out to New Jersey in the near future.
Sounds great. We will talk to you soon. You have a great week. And to my audience, guys, if you're thinking about running, this is the time. Check them out. We'll see you.